That is a lot of Macintosh stuff. And in particular, that is a lot of Macintosh SE 30 stuff. All of this was sent in recently by Derek, because he had a go at building his own SE 30 motherboard, this purple one here. He was using the green one as a donor. But unfortunately, he can't get this to work. So he got in touch, asked if I would take a look at it for him. Certainly, I don't mind doing that, but I didn't have an SE 30 to test it with, and that's why this machine came with it. He also has sent in a bag of goodies. We'll take a look in there later. And there's even another blank board, although that is for a future video. The purpose of today's video is to try and get this board fixed for Derek. The other thing that we need to do is to take this expansion slot off the green board and install it onto the purple one. But that is getting ahead of ourselves. We need to figure out first why this doesn't work. There was a full machine in here. I thought it was just a case, power supply, CRT, all that good stuff. But no, there is another board in here, another working board. So we may be able to use this to try and diagnose any fault on this. But as I say, let's first of all see what this one's doing. I've taken the ROM simm off this board and we'll stick it into this one. So purple board in the case. There is a bit of rust here on this case, so we'll maybe try and deal with that later. But let's just see what this is doing. And apologies for the mismatch in the refresh there. There's not a lot I can do about that with my recording equipment, I'm afraid. But we have a screen with just lines on it. You can see the extent of that rust there, and it is quite significant. I wonder, is this the machine that green board came from? The green board from which Derek had obviously salvaged some of the components for his new purple one. But I suppose the one thing that we should have done first actually was test this board, just to make sure that this works okay. Just to make sure that this chassis, everything in here is working okay. So it chimes, that's always a good sign. And it seems to boot, but it's looking for some boot media. There's nothing connected in there at the minute, although this machine did have a blue SCSI installed within it. But for now, I'm just happy enough that we know that board in there seems to work fine. So the failure that we've seen on the screen, that is known as Simasimac. I think that's how you pronounce it anyway. And I'll stick a better picture of it up there. But typically when that happens, from what I've been able to read online, the culprit on, say, an old board would be corrosion caused by a leaking battery, causing problems on the ROM simm, potentially on the RAM itself, as the issue seems to be related to the data path between the ROM simm, the CPU, the glue chip and the RAM. Now, the first thing that I was going to try was to swap the RAM between these boards, but I just noticed something on this ROM simm socket. There is corrosion in here. This ROM simm socket, this must have came off that green board, and there is definitely corrosion on some of those pins. In fact, some of them look as if they've rusted. There's one there, for example, or those couple actually. As I say, I think that came off here, and you can certainly see evidence of corrosion that would have been there underneath that ROM simm socket. So first thing to try then is let's try and just clean that up. I'll go in there with a lot of contact cleaner and see if that resolves the issue. In fact, just before I do hit it with the contact cleaner, I'm just going to go in here with the wire brush pen, because as I said, some of that did look like rust. Then we'll just hit it with some of this. Okay, that's about as clean as I can get that. So let's test it. Well, no, it's still giving the same problem. I went right along that side of the sim, just testing connectivity from it onto the board, and it's all fine. So that is not our problem. Next thing I want to test is the RAM. And we'll just swap these 4 sticks for these ones, because, well, we know that this board, it boots without any problems. Nope, still just doing the same thing. Well, it's not that and it's not those, but the next thing I want to check is all the solder work. Now, given that the fault may be associated with the glue chip, I have removed said chip here, just to inspect the solder points below it. I do need to get the magnifying glass out for a closer look, but to be honest with you, initially it all does look fine. But what is that there? What is that sticking out of the bottom of the socket? It's loose. Is that a little bit of metal? Where would that have come from? Putting that aside though, I can't really fault any of the solder work in here. It all looks okay. Although I do think it would be worth just testing that again. Because if that bit of metal was underneath that socket, shorting out a couple of those pins, that might have been enough to cause the problem. Nope, wasn't that. I'm just going to quickly go around and check underneath everything else that is socketed here. So CPU out, that all looks fine. No bent pins or anything like that. So all of these components, they mostly look fine. These 2 Sony chips here, there's a bit of corrosion on the legs of them, but I think it's just superficial, and the corrosion is certainly just at the top of the legs here. They've been well cleaned where the legs are making contact with the socket below. Just going to take a quick look around all the PLCC stuff though. There's been a couple of dull pins on some of these chips. I've just been going over them with the fiberglass pen as required, really, just to bring them back. There's a couple there on the FPU. But even though they may be a little bit dull, honestly, I don't think that would cause the problem. All the solder points in below everything, they all look fine. Let's just give it one more quick try. Nope, it's still showing the Simasimac screen. Is that the correct pronunciation? Simasimac? I really don't know. I think it's time to pull out the schematics. Well, I went and found schematics. That was easy enough. They're available on GitHub and I'll link it in the video's description. But as well as that, I had a quick chat with some of the guys on the 68K MLA forums, and I've discovered that you can power this out of the case with the simple use of a standard 24-pin ATX extension cable, because this half of it matches up with that. That is incredibly handy. I did manage to double check with the guy who created this board that yes, it is a known good working design, no issues from that point of view. I noticed on the bottom of it here there are 2 sets of jumper pads, but those do not need to be set when using a ROM sim like we are. They would only need to be set if you're using these ROM chips instead. And the other thing that I discovered is that our Simasimac or Simasimac or whatever it is, well, I said earlier that it seems to be related to the ROM sim, CPU, glue and RAM. Well, no, not exactly. In fact, what that pattern you see on the screen is just evidence of the board not booting. It's not starting up, it's not clearing the VRAM, and what is displayed on screen is essentially the garbage that is within the VRAM when the system is first powered up. So there's lots of resources online telling you it's just going to be a ROM simm problem, communication error on the data or address bus, or a RAM problem. Well, it might be that, but in reality it can be anything. So let's take this back to square one. What are the three things that any computer needs at the very basic level to be able to work? We need power. Well, we know we've got that. But we need reset and we need a clock. So let's check those two things very quickly. Let's see if we have a working reset and a clock signal. Oh, and the other thing that Bolly told me, he's the guy who designed this board, is that at the ASC chip here, there are two crystals installed, as you can see, but there only should be one. It should be one or the other. Let's just remove this one, and only because it's handy to do so. I will desolder the legs of it properly later, but for now I'm just going to snip even just one of them. There. That is that disconnected. Or in fact, if we're doing right, there. Now it's definitely disconnected. So let's start with the reset signal. We can pick that up easily from the FPU on pin 13. Pin 1 is here on the middle of this side, and the pin 9 there, that's 10, 11, 12, 13. Now when I power the machine on, it should be low and then go high. And that is exactly what we just seen. Okay, reset is fine right across the board. I have checked it on all the various components where it does live, and it's there and it's working as you would expect. What about clock? Again, we can check that on the FPU. Pin 11, that's this one. And there's certainly something pulsing away there. Probably safe to say that is our clock signal. And so again, having checked it, there does appear to be clocks present everywhere that they need to be. Now, with this, I can't accurately measure the clock. I have no way of knowing if it is running at the correct frequency. And unfortunately, the oscilloscope I have won't go above 1 or 2 megahertz. I am currently in the market for a new one. But let's just make an assumption that the clocks are fine. So we've got power, we've got reset, and we've got clock. But we don't have any life out of this machine whatsoever. I had thought maybe if we push the NMI button, we might have got this thing to play its death jingle, but no, it's not even doing that. So the next thing that I want to try, along with the board and everything else that Derek sent, in that bag of goodies, well, there was one other complete chipset. So let's just swap it all over and see if this makes any difference. Or do you know what would be better actually? Let's swap them one at a time. First one I came to is the glue chip. Let's swap this. That was interesting. Not even a picture on the screen. You know, that might be evidence to something else that was suggested to me on the 68K forum. And that is that all these sockets here maybe aren't the best idea. If you look at the original board, practically nothing is socketed. In fact, the only thing in a socket is the video ROM. Everything else is soldered direct. And certainly those PLCC type chips, well, it does seem that there is scope for getting bad connection in these sockets with these chips, especially when they were previously surface mounted. I went right round the legs and that there with the fiberglass pen, are all nice and shiny now, so there shouldn't be any connectivity issues. No video signal. You can sort of tell because the fan runs a bit harder in the PSU. Look, I push on that. There's the system trying to start. There's definitely a connectivity issue, either in that socket or with one of the pins of the socket to the chip. Let's try this chip in it again. And look, it comes up straight away this time. Simasimac again, but a connectivity issue between the chip and its socket, between that chip and the socket. Could that be the problem? May we have a connectivity issue somewhere else on one of these sockets between its chip and itself? It is hard to know really, isn't it? I'm going to go through here and replace them all one for one, as I said, just to see if we can pick up any more behaviour like what we've seen when swapping out that one. I've swapped over everything that I can. We actually don't have replacements for a lot of these components up in here, all the PLCC type chips. Well, I say that, we don't have loose replacements for them. We do have replacements for them on this scrap board. But I thought this was interesting, so swapping everything didn't really make any difference until I got to these two VRAM chips. Well, I think they're the VRAM anyway. And when I swap those over, well, you can see we now have a different picture on the screen. It's maybe not coming across that well on the camera, but it is black and white horizontal lines. But from what I gather, that is just another variation of the Simasimac failure. And I wonder, is the change in what's displayed just down to the change in these chips? They are from a different manufacturer. They are a slightly different chip. Well, I say that, they're obviously the same part. Just these are Texas Instruments 4461s. Whereas the others are NEC's D41264s. Swapping back to those though, and the usual pattern is back on the screen. So before I do go to the hassle of removing all those other chips, all these parts, before I do go to the hassle of removing all of that off the other scrap board, the one thing that's definitely in the back of my mind is when we swapped out the glue chip. It was just a blank screen until we pressed down on this chip, and then the machine started up, implying that there was a poor connection at this socket. That sort of makes me think that we may have poor connections elsewhere in here. In fact, there may be a poor connection anywhere. Because bear in mind, when Derek first started working on this board, it looked like this. There was nothing on it whatsoever. Well, nothing apart from some of the surface mounted stuff on the bottom. So before I go any further, I'm going to go around and basically reflow everything. Granted, that might seem like a bit of an extreme measure, but it shouldn't take that long. I'm just going to reflow all the surface mounted stuff on the top side, all the through hole stuff here. I'm sure it's all fine. But we'll pull all of these chips out of the sockets again. I'm going to reflow the sockets. We'll clean up the edges of all the chips. We'll maybe even mount them all in the vise and just drag a bit of fresh solder over the pins on the side of them. And that's all just because I want to rule out for sure that there are no more connectivity issues. Okay, everything has been reflowed, but the other thing that I did, remember the crystals here? Well, it was suggested to me that when we had the two of them installed there originally, they would have been fighting against each other. One of the guys on the 68K MLA forums, he suggested that those crystals may have been damaged. So originally we just removed the cylinder type one, but I have now also removed the surface mount one that was in there beside it, refitted this cylinder type one. This came off that other spare green board. But we have a problem. When trying to reflow in this area, to get the soldering iron in to the other side of these two components, I had to remove the RAM chips. Now, no real problem because I had these out before. Although when refitting them again, this SIM socket, it split. That bit broke off it. And it's not like I was putting any excessive amount of force on it. This just came away. But for now anyway, I think we should be okay to test it. Because as you can hopefully see, all the pins within the socket, they're still there. And that first pin, it is still in position and making okay contact to the RAM SIM. So let's see if that breathes any life into our SE30. Full reflow of the motherboard and the refinish of all the PLCC chips. Is that enough to get this thing to boot? Still Simasimac. Wonder might it be just a bad connection on the RAM here. I hold it and reset there and then try and just wiggle these, especially that first one where it's going to have a dodgy connection. Nope. I still think it might be a connectivity issue here, just because there's nothing to hold the RAM SIM in this bottom corner here. You know, it's only being held on that side, but reseated it there. And let's try it again. It chimed. Grey screen. And it's looking for boot media. It's working. Is it working? I think it's working. Fantastic. So is that all it was? A flaky connection somewhere on one of these chips? Could it always have been a flaky connection on the RAM? I don't think so, because we did have the other memory in here originally. Remember, this is the RAM that came off the other working green board. It's not the RAM that was in here originally. Although I wonder if I power that off, and if we upset that first one there, just push it back a wee bit. Well, no, it is still booting. I suppose it still may be a connectivity issue somewhere on a chip. And just for the few minutes there that, you know, I've been running power through this, everything will have warmed up slightly, and maybe that is making better connection somewhere. So what I'm going to do is we'll just turn it off and we'll leave it sitting for about half an hour. Just give it plenty of time to cool down, and then we'll try it again. Okay, so it's about half an hour later. The board is pretty much ice cold again. Let's try it. Still chiming. Grey screen cursor. And it wants to boot. So maybe it was just a connectivity issue on the RAM. Although I think the original problem, I think that was more likely to be a connectivity issue on a socket. Whether it be the solder work on the socket to the board, or whether it was the chip to the socket. If you asked me to guess, I would say it was that. It was a poor connection on one of these ICs between itself and the socket it's within. I think the issue that we're seeing now with the occasional Simasimac is down to this damaged SIM socket. So I'll need to think about what to do with that. But in the meantime, the other thing that Derek had asked me to do is to pull this expansion port off this green board and fit it on there. Well, as you've seen there, some of those pins just would not come out of the board, so I had little option but to pull off what I could, take the rest of those out manually, and then we'll just need to put them back in here. But this is rather heavily corroded. Lots of corrosion stuck up in here, and in fact you can sort of see it even looking down through those holes. It is very evident on those pins. There has been quite significant corrosion underneath this socket, so I'm going to give the whole thing a soak in white vinegar for a while, just to try and eat any of that away. Give it a soak in white vinegar and then same again in IPA. Okay, that's been in there for about 20 minutes or so. Just going to give it a quick going over with the toothbrush, just to make sure that all the corrosion is definitely off it, or as much of it as we can get anyway. I do think this would be a great job for an air compressor. I was looking at them recently. I fancy getting myself an air compressor. Just a small one for under the bench. Be really handy for drying off things like this. You can see the loose pins themselves, they've come up really well. They were green before, but they don't look too bad now. So they will go into any of these holes where the pins fell out of. In fact, hold on a second. That pin has like a wavy edge on it. And the ones in the end there, they have that sort of wavy edge, so maybe these ones need to go in this end. I think I'm putting that one in the wrong way around. Yeah, that's better. It'll only go in one direction. There's another one with a wavy pin on it. Then all these other ones, they have just straight pins. Okay, I'm going to dump out this vinegar. Look at all the floaties in there. That just shows you how much corrosion was on that. I'm going to dump that out, refill this with IPA, give that a bath in it for, I don't know, 20 minutes, half an hour, something like that. Then we'll let it dry off and we can fit it to the board. Okay, that is now fitted. I've hooked everything up again and we've got the blue SCSI connected. Want to see if it boots, but we've also got the keyboard and mouse connected up as well. Just because, well, we may as well test it. If it does indeed boot, this will prove if the ADB ports work. Seems to be working fine. It's booting to Macintosh. And we can move the cursor about, so at least the mouse works. I'm sure the ADB ports are working fine. And there we are. It's booted into the operating system and crashed. What is going on? It won't even reset. Push the reset button, but the desktop screen is still there. Let's try a power cycle. No, it is definitely not happy. I wonder, do we have an issue with this connectivity here again? Okay, booted, chimed. Let's see if it works this time. Seems to be okay now. Probably just that dodgy socket, you know, the one that's broke. Let's open a notepad so we can test the keyboard. Yeah, that's fine. So other than the fact that we have a damaged RAM sim socket, I'm pretty happy to call this board fixed. So that is pretty much it. We have now one working purple board in here. Yep, still chimes, and hopefully it will boot to the OS. Yep, there it goes. So that will be going back to Derek along with his own green working board. The spare chipset, his blue SCSI, that green scrap board, all that's going back to him. The damaged SIM socket on the motherboard, what I did in the end was just glue that bit that broke off. I glued that back on. If Derek wants, I will order a replacement. The only issue is, for me to get that, it needs to come from America, and it's going to be several weeks, I would imagine, before it lands. So I can even order that and send it to him separately if he likes. But for now, it's glued on. Those RAM sims are in there. If you just left them in there, I honestly think it would be fine. But all of that stuff is going back to him. There is the bag of goodies though. So within this, he has very kindly sent me my own blue SCSI. Now granted, there's a damaged resistor pack in there, so I'll need to replace that. But other than that, this should be fully operational. It even has a rather poorly fitting bracket carrier assembly for it here. I can always reprint something more suited to carry this. But that is fantastic. Thank you very much, Derek. That will come in very handy. But he's also sent another blue SCSI that needs built. And I have more or less two of them. Yes, I need to get this bit to go onto this one, but that's fantastic. I'm not really sure what this red thing is. I think that's a ROM sim. That has to go back to him though, I think. We didn't really use that, sure we didn't. No need to use it really, to be honest. But what he did do, you see, was just send me all the spare bits and pieces, just to try and help in diagnosing the problem. Speaking of which, there was a set of spare sockets. We didn't need any of that. He's also provided an RGB to HDMI board. So that's something we could look at building in a future video. Maybe try and integrate it into one of my Macintoshes. And then there was this wee adapter that he had actually sent me previously when I was working on the IIci, just to double check the video output. Although, if you remember back to those videos, the cable that I did make, well, it worked okay. But for all my hard work, he's let me have the two blue SCSIs, the RGB, HDMI, and this purple board. But the other thing, I have managed to come to an agreement with him that this case with the power supply and the monitor in it, I have bought this off him for very much mates rates. So thank you very much, Derek, for agreeing to sell this to me. The only thing I need to find for myself now is a chipset for this purple board. But that could come at some point in the future. For now though, I am more than happy that we've got the purple board up and running. So I'll package up all of Derek's stuff and send it back to him. I'm pretty sure the fault on it was just a bad connection between one of the chips and a socket. Yes, it may seem like a fairly straightforward problem, but sometimes it does just take a fresh set of eyes to look over something to pick up on silly little things like that. It's working now though, so it will be on its way back to Derek and hopefully give him plenty of years of enjoyment with a brand new SE30 motherboard. So that is it for now. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you did, I would appreciate a thumbs up. Why not hit subscribe if you haven't done so already? There's still plenty more yet to come here on CRG, and I'll see you next time.